Well, welcome to a special throwback episode of Retire Repurposed. Today, we're going way back into the archives, a couple of hundred episodes ago, all the way back to episode number 8, where Ben Taatjes first explored a topic that's always been near and dear to his heart, the positive aspects of work. You know, in a culture that often views work as a necessary evil to endure until retirement, this conversation offers a radically different perspective. We'll explore the often unforeseen benefits of work and make the case that you were literally created to work, not as punishment, but as fulfillment. Ben reveals why the only real path to flourishing comes through meaningful, engaging work, not leisure in retirement. Throughout this foundational episode, he proves powerful questions about your working career that will help you transition into a truly repurposed retirement. Whether you're planning for retirement or already there, this throwback conversation will challenge you to reconsider work's role in your life and help you carry its best elements into your next chapter of life. Enjoy this episode. All right, Ben, today we are going to talk about work, and this is a really, I think, right off the bat, kind of a counterintuitive conversation to have, because this podcast is all about retirement, and the opposite of retirement is work. But we're going to really, I think, dissect and show people why work is so beneficial. So that's what today's podcast is all about. Let's get us started and just talk about kind of our number one point that we want to go over, and that is we were created to work, bottom line. Try to prove that to people.
Well, I feel that way, because I know, just, days when I'm not working and days when I'm not productive, I feel like I'm missing something.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel that. They feel as if, I didn't get anything accomplished. I kind of wasted a day. You get that feeling. I think that, just common sense tells me that.
Yeah.
But I think more importantly than that, I think it's even biblical. Mm-hmm. And when we begin to look at our beginnings and how and when we were created, I think we can see that clearly we were created to work.
Yeah, and I would totally attest to that. I don't mind a little leisure. I'll be the first one to admit I like a day where I don't have to do a lot, but my personality. My personality, I thrive off of production, and my wife certainly knows that too. It's kind of hard for me to take a little break, and that's probably more of a personality trait, but man, I feel the best when I'm cranking away and I'm getting the honey to-do list done on a Saturday or whenever that is, and that makes me feel really good. You mentioned kind of biblical roots. Trace us back. I mean, we're going back to like literally page 2 or 3 of the book to talk about work.
Yeah, you go right back to Genesis. And I've had this conversation with a lot of clients, with a lot of individuals, and the question comes back, you think we're going to work in heaven? And I always say yes, absolutely. And I think
that doesn't sound like heaven.
to most people today, it doesn't.
Right.
It's like, well, heaven should be, us just, hanging out and doing everything we love and, all these things. And no, I think we're going to work. And I think when I go back to Genesis, and I would encourage you to do that, go back and read, I think, starting like Genesis 2, verse 5, we read, there's a line that says something like, there was no man to work the ground. Remember, this is pre-fall. This is before the fall, and Genesis 2:15 is when it says the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it.
He actually uses the word work in there, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why man was created and was put in the garden was to work the land.
Yeah, it's part of who we are, Jared, and I think that's the piece that many people are missing. When you start to look negative on work, it is part of who we're created to be. Therefore, we will not be as fulfilled as people if we are not working.
Sure. And God gave Adam other jobs to do in the garden. It wasn't just to grow stuff.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at the things he was tasked with doing. I think one of those first jobs he had to do was name the animals. What a cool job, right? Can you imagine being in the garden, right, and this animal, and this is what we're going to call it.
Right.
That was a creative work he was doing.
Yeah.
So some of us in our careers, we're creative people, and we're writing, we're doing, whatever it might be. I think we're created to do that, so to be creative. But then it wasn't just those type of, and some people might call it more of a fluffy job, right? But then the people that actually work with their hands can look back and say, no, he was actually tending the soil as well. And that was the other thing, actually, working in the garden.
Right.
And that was laborious work. It was work with his hands. It was something that he probably, I'm envisioning him sweating at times,
right,
and getting down and watching things grow and being part of real, work, if you will.
Right. But that's exactly how it was created to function. And I think when you go to now the back of the book, for those of you who know about kind of just the Bible and kind of the just kind of the spiritual timeline we're on, I think that day is coming back. We're kind of in this middle section where it's maybe not so great. But I think going back to your point, will we work in heaven? I would have to agree with that. It's not just going to be playtime the whole time. There's going to be duties to do, but it's going to be this fulfilling kind. I just can't imagine Adam was in there kicking rocks down the road, saying I got to work till 4 today. That's probably not what it was all about.
It had to have been part of life,
right?
Where it just looked like a life where there was rest and there was work. I mean, God did that too, right? It was 6 days on, 1 day off.
Right.
So I think both parts of work and rest are important. And I think as we look at retirees, that needs to reflect their lives,
sure,
right? And all of us. I mean, work is a positive thing. We were created to do it.
So I guess an easy question for you is, why now today is there kind of this negative connotation for work? And that's not for everybody. I don't think everybody views work that way. But again, going back to kind of mindset we've talked about, when it comes to work and retirement, oh my goodness, I just can't wait to be done with work. Thank God it's Friday.
Yep.
I'm counting down the years to my retirement. Why do we have this negative connotation with work?
Well, I think, again, going back to the Bible and kind of what that looked like, I think it's after the fall.
Which is like the next page.
Yeah, it is.
Chapter 3.
Turn the page, and there you are.
Right.
But read it, and I think you'll notice that, when the land was cursed, and now there was thistles, and there was, that created, I think, some of that beginnings of negative parts of work.
Sure.
Not all work became negative, but certainly it became harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine, I think in heaven we probably won't have thistles. So to any farmers tuning in,
it's good news.
We're probably not going to have to worry about the weed growth. But I mean, still, that I think was the first thing. And that kind of gives us our negative part about work is, when it becomes toilsome and like you can't get anywhere and you can't get ahead, all that stuff. I think you're not accomplishing things.
Yeah.
I think that piece kind of brings that negative aspect to it.
I think farmers will relate with that right there, because you have those years you work so hard and like it just doesn't come through, and you deal with that toilsome word, which is actually a biblical word. To kind of be able to attach our work with the fruits of our labor, and it can be so burdensome. I think of another way to connect the dots too. If you go just maybe a couple books ahead, and then you start talking about the Israelites being thrown into slavery under Pharaoh. What were they forced to do? They're forced to work. And so there was forced labor, and when the plagues were coming, he told the Egyptians, Pharaoh did, he's like, crank it on them harder. And work them harder. So now you're using this thing that we were created to do to kind of punish people. And I think there's like a little bit of that kind of floating around in today's society, thousands of years later, to why there's this kind of, I don't know, I would say just negative feeling towards work.
Yeah, and in our society, like you were mentioning, I mean, there's this, thank God it's Friday thing, and you get into that mode, and oh crap, it's Monday, I think is even more so the case with people. It's like, that Sunday night dread. Yeah. It's like, the weekend's done, now I got to go back. And right. I think that, that fall moment, I think that's when a lot of that came in.
We want to tell people on this podcast that the only way that you can actually flourish is by working. Again, kind of a counterintuitive idea when it comes to retirement. Ben, why don't you bust some common myths or mindsets that maybe people have versus work and retirement?
Well, I think we touched on the first one there, is that my life kind of begins when I stop working. And I think that can go for people of any age. But when I'm not working, then life begins.
Right.
So that can be just your day. Like during the day, for a lot of us, it's like, well, I'll get through my day, and then life will begin at night,
right.
or when I'm not at work. And I think for a retiree, what society's going to tell you is once you actually are through with your working years, now it begins. Now it's the permanent vacation where I can do all these things that I was created to do, which work has got in the way of. And I think that's the issue.
That's a massive. I don't want to say like a complex, but I think that's where people need to absolutely start there when it comes to retirement, is to reevaluate that what you just said there, where really executing who I am has to start without work. It cannot function that way. It won't function while you're in your career, and it won't function that way in retirement either.
Yeah, it's what a terrible way to live.
Right.
Where you're just, someday I can be done with this job.
Yeah.
And, there are people listening today that don't like their work.
Yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves. There are people that don't. And I think, maybe that needs to reassess your work that you're doing as well. But I think when we put such a negative spin on work, mm-hmm. and it's more of a negative thing,
yeah.
I think that just causes us to kind of get in that downward spiral
right.
of, now I got to go back to work, and my life will begin when I get through with this.
I think a lot of people think that work is actually holding them back. It's the thing that keeps them in prison, which again kind of goes back to Pharaoh and the Israelites, what I just mentioned. The opposite is actually true. Again, it's a counterintuitive argument. Work is actually the thing that actually sets us free.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's another myth, is that work is holding us back. Work is holding us back, and it's the thing that is getting in the way of everything. It shouldn't be looked at that way, because
right.
it isn't.
Right, exactly. Talk about this. When people retire, depression, isolation, all of these negative things can come into play. Again, if we buy society's viewpoint on work, once that's gone, then how could we possibly be depressed and dissatisfied? Try to connect those dots for us.
Yeah, that proves the point, right? If work was really the problem, then once you're done with work, you should be, whether you're retired or laid off, for example, or whatever it might be, when you're not working, you should be fulfilled.
You should be as happy as can be.
You should be content and happy. Everything should be going well. Yeah. And that's not the case. So if you're in retirement and you've found that after that kind of honeymoon phase where you're just able to just take that break, which again I'm a proponent of, that initial break is fine, but there needs to be something else. But to think that work got in the way, and work is what it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So it debunks the what you're talking about. It debunks the fact that once we leave our jobs, we're now happy.
Yeah.
Because retirees today, not all of them, but a lot of them are struggling. And they're struggling with not replacing that impactful, purpose-driven work that they've always had. Mm. And that is one of the biggest issues we see.
I think that you and I can even relate to that. Of course, we're not of retirement age, but as you just mentioned, we're not suggesting that you could never not work. You and I, for example, we've each gone on vacations with our families for a week or two at a time, and it's great.
It's great.
It's fun. Trust me, that is not what we're suggesting at all. I would say, from just me personally, I can't speak for you and everybody listening, but going on vacation, taking a sabbatical, breaking away, putting away the phone, refreshing, and I think almost essential to some extent. That's again, I think we can all agree there. But there's something that's really gratifying that vacation can't give me, that working can give me. Does that make sense? There's a level of fulfillment there that flying to a beach someday can't do for me.
It can't. And you go back to where we started this show. Think of Adam and how much he must have felt a sense of accomplishment after naming all the animals, after looking at what had the work that had been done.
Right.
And even God goes, it's very clear, as he looked upon the work that he had done, it was good, and there's a gratification. And I think if we don't have that in our lives, it doesn't mean you have to have a career forever. But if we don't have that sense of, accomplishment, that purpose, that impact living, we will fall down that, that's when you see that depression and you see the problems that, many people in society, whether you're retiring or not, feel when they're not at work.
You actually talk in your book about this idea of true rest. We've mentioned it on the show before. Explain to folks what true rest is and how work kind of is part of the equation.
Yeah, well, speaking specifically to retirees, we want them to see that when we earn our rest, it's much more beneficial. So we're not talking about, and you can we're talking physical rest here. The day that you have a lot of work out in the yard or wherever it is, and you hear people say, man, I was just tired, and it felt good to rest. Right. Looks a whole lot different than the day where you're just basically resting and passing time all day, right, and then you rest at night.
Right. Don't even know what day it is.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the issue, right? We have to have the activities in our lives, whether it be physical or mental, that keep us active enough that we can enjoy rest. And that's what we're talking about with earned rest. Something we did, some type of work that gave us fulfillment, so that way we were able to rest.
Here's a dumb question. If work is so good, I'm being devil's advocate here, by the way. If work is so darn good, which is what we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes, then why in the world should I retire?
That's a good question. I would say, a lot of people today have no choice but to retire, whether that be the type of career they have. They're kind of forced out of the workplace. Sometimes our bodies can't do the work that we had been doing. There's all kinds of reasons for that. Right. I'm a proponent, though, of not retiring but becoming repurposed. And, again, that's the title of the book. That's the title of the podcast. That's what we're trying to get people to do, is to look at impactful living, but it might not look the same as your day job did.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it right there. That's exactly what I was thinking. There's a difference between working a job and creating value and impacting others. We're not, just because your day job may go away someday, that doesn't mean that the value you add to others goes away. And I think that's the big thing that people miss when it comes to retirement.
Yeah, it's impactful, purposeful living where there's others focused.
Yeah.
Right, where we're looking at impacting others and making a difference in their life in some way, and that doesn't require me to go to an 8 to 5 job or whatever it might be. It does not require a paycheck. It requires looking for areas of service and stepping out and doing those areas of service, even if we're not getting paid. Yeah. You can earn every bit of rest if you're doing that type of stuff and not getting paid. It's going to feel the same good. In fact, for many retirees, it feels better to not get the paycheck, because they're so much more free to do whatever they want to, as long as they keep some purposeful living in there and balance it out with rest. Right? I mean, we talked about that earlier. We want to have those vacations while retired. I love that idea. Right. It's like, can I vacation when I'm retired? Well, absolutely, you can.
Plus, you better be putting in the work or the benefit or adding value somewhere in the equation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it. By the way, when it comes to the biblical aspect of this, retirement's not in that. It's not in the book. It's like 2,000 pages long, and it's not in there.
No, it really isn't covered.
And it makes sense, but it makes sense though. If you look at why man was created, and his connections to work. Why would we ever be called to step away from that fully and completely? It just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And there's lots in the Bible about looking back and enjoying the fruits of our work and being able to I won't get into specific scriptures, but there's a lot in there about that. But it doesn't say now you should just stop adding value to people and focus on your own needs and just
buy an RV,
and travel. Now, again, nothing wrong with buying an RV, but
I want one someday.
But again, it needs to look and feel different than what society's telling us. It can't be a permanent vacation.
As we wrap up this podcast here over the next couple of minutes, let's talk about the reflection and reflecting on the benefits of work, what are some questions people can ask themselves, whether they've just retired recently, maybe are looking to retire someday? What are some kind of self-reflective questions that people can be asking themselves?
I think a good one is, how did work give me purpose? So to just look at your day job and say, what parts of my day created purpose in my life? And don't think that every single thing is going to be easy to spot. Mm-hmm. So if you are in construction, you're swinging the hammer, you're doing that stuff, and you're creating. Look at the end result. What are you making? Who's going to enjoy it? There's some purpose there, right? It's sometimes easier if you're working one-on-one with an individual. So if you're a nurse or if you're a doctor, you're able to see right away, hey, I was able to impact that person right away. But what part of our job gave us purpose? And I think that's a good place to start.
Well, how do we have purpose? Well, we have to have impact on others. Well, how do we have impact on others? Others have to be in the equation, right?
Exactly.
And so every single job, whether you are working a job or own a business, you are either providing a product or a service. At the end of the day, you can boil every single job or business down to that. Well, somebody has to be buying and consuming that product or that service. Well, who's doing that? People. So it doesn't matter what job you have or what career you're in. You can somehow boil that down to a greater purpose, whether it's for your company or completing a mission statement for the place that you work. I don't care who you are, what you're doing. That you can find that even in any job.
Yeah. And the greatest leaders of companies today are allowing and showing their team how they're impacting people,
right?
Because that's the game changer for people is let's look at how we're actually adding value and creating purpose by impacting people.
Right. So the first question to ask yourself, how did your work give you purpose? What's another one?
Well, the second one would be, how were you using your skills, abilities, and passions to deliver value to others? So again, now we're tying in, we have to look at the others piece still, but you're created with a specific gift of different talents and abilities. So how are you using how you were created? And also we're created with certain passions, that things that we like to do and things that just, we can't. It's kind of like the things that we can't get away from, right? These are passions. It's like I've felt like this was super important to me, and I always keep coming back to whatever that might be. So look at your work to say, how am I using my skills and abilities, really those God-given talents in our work, and then also, how our passions line up.
One of the questions you ask folks is, what are you going to miss about work? Again, counterintuitive to our mindset on retirement. I'm not going to miss anything.
Yeah.
I just can't get away from it. But the reality is, there are going to be things, even if you're not a huge fan of your job, that you're going to miss.
Yeah, I think it would come down to almost every job that there's things in your work that you like doing.
Right.
And again, as we look into retirement, let's focus on those things and try to move those things into our repurpose, whatever that looks like. So what were those favorite things that we liked? What am I going to miss? How can I keep those in my life?
Right. The other ones are a little bit more external, at least not purpose-driven. Talk about social connections, how you might miss those aspects, and how work has played into that.
Well, our work, even if you're not a huge fan of some of your coworkers, you have coworkers. You have people around you. You have social connection at work. So again, let's look at who's around us and really hone in on making sure we replace those.
Yeah. One thing you do mention, and we talk a lot about on this podcast, is staying active. What your job at the very least has given you an idea or a reason to get out of bed and move your body. Without it, holy mackerel. That's something a lot of folks don't consider when it comes to their work.
Yeah, a huge part of work is just moving.
Yeah.
And even if you think you got a pretty, office job, pretty sedentary, you're still getting up, you're still moving around from time to time. It still creates activity in our life, and we've got to make sure we replace that. That's definitely a positive part of work.
As we wrap this up, give folks kind of the big takeaway or the big question that they need to ponder.
I think people need to look at, how are you going to replace all of these positive aspects of work when you retire?
Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Retire Repurpose. Make sure you hit subscribe on iTunes, and for more information, visit us online at retirerepurpose.com. I'm Jared Sebesta. Remember, don't retire, become repurposed. We'll see you next time.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.